Hello and welcome back to Nerd Goblin Art. I'm Lula. Today I'm painting. Now I mainly paint in acrylics, and I do like painting on canvases, but I really enjoy painting on wooden slices. So I'm just doing a first layer just with some titanium white. Just to give my painter a good go of showing it better. I don't always do this. Um, these wooden slices are from Hobbycraft in the UK. They were on offer at the time, I think for about £2 a slice, which wasn't too bad. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm using Phalo blue, and I'm mixing in. I'm adding. I believe I'm using a mixture. I'm just trying to remember. I'm mixing in a bit of white and also some, I think, deep magenta. So when I'm painting, particularly my style, I like to paint circular. I just find it enjoyable. It's as simple as that. Um, and I like to get all the way to the edges, and I like to paint in layers. So I'm just going to my palette. I'm using a Stay Wet palette, by the way. Just better for keeping my paints. And when you're seeing me dabbing on the kitchen roll, there's this well-used piece of kitchen roll. I'm just getting rid of a bit of excess paint and such. And there's Calcifer, my cat, one of my cats. Very interested in what I'm up to. So here I'm just going between white and the phthalo blue, because I want, obviously, a real good glow. This is more of a nighttime scene. I like to paint whimsical. I didn't at this point have a full idea in my head of what I was actually going to be painting. But the white, adding in the white there gives a lovely glow, an impression of the light coming from the moon in the sky. Now, layers. Layers are an absolute thing. It's very rare that I paint in a colour and that's it. So I'm once again, there we go, I'm drying there. And please make sure that your hairdryer, if you're using one, is set on the cool setting, because you don't want to cause any colour shift with your paint. Every now and again you'll see me just tapping just to make sure that it is actually dry. Okay, this is probably, I think it's about my third layer now. Now once again I'm going to my palette and I'm taking phthalo blue mixed with white, and there's just a tiny bit of magenta, of deep magenta in there. It's just to give it a point of interest for the eye. You can't see it a great deal via my camera, but in person the colour is definitely there. Again, going for some more white, just keeping up with the layers that I'm adding in. I think it gives a really lovely glow. Gives the idea of it. It's very rare that I do any kind of detail for a moon piece. Now this is my fluid titanium white by Golden. Um, I like to use this when I'm going to be doing a starry effect. And there we go. It is simple as that. You can use a tough brush for this. I used to use a tough brush, but that is a art Sherpa from one of the kits that they used to have out for sale. It is old, and I don't believe they're available anymore. Not currently, anyway. This is my Dritz tool. It's like a tailor's pen. They're available on Amazon. I have had it for a very, very long time. And when you buy them, they come with inserts. And I just find it useful. You can just use normal old crayon, not crayon, you can use normal old um, chalk. I just find this gives me more control because I can sharpen the chalk. Um, I knew when I started doing this painting today that I wanted to do something with pumpkins. Is I know it's August, I know, but my mind I love autumn, and the last couple of weeks it's all I'm really thinking about really. It's the time that I like, it's the time of year that I happen to like. Um, I don't always draw in what I'm going to do. I'm not using any references whatsoever. I'm just doing what I feel today. Um, and now I'm just, yeah, trust those layers. I'm going to, I'm using Mars Black mixed with some burnt sienna. And this is just to get in basically my lining for the pumpkins. This is something I always, these are colours I always use when I'm doing my base colours for things like pumpkins and even mushrooms as well. I'll often use the burnt sienna, Mars Black, and cad reds. I am using heavy body paints. I'm using a mixture actually. I've got some Liquidex on my palette. I've got some golden and some Windsor and Newton. So I'm just getting in basically what would be the shadow parts of the pumpkin. You know, those little bit ingrained bits. I do switch out my brushes quite often as well. I use what's comfortable, and I do recommend that people use what is comfortable and adapt. You know, if the brush feels too big, then it's too big. Swap your brush out, feel comfortable with your brushes. Um, I started off obviously with quite a large hog to get the colouring because it works for getting in the paints. And this one, I believe, it might be my cat's tongue. So I'm using black here, Mars Black with my burnt sienna, but more burnt sienna than black. Again, this is to get in my groundwork for those pumpkins because it is night time, so the pumpkins are going to be darker, but we're going to be lightening up a little bit, obviously, so we can see them, and from the moon. So there's going to be some light from the moon eventually coming onto these pumpkins. I'm painting as well. I didn't say at the beginning. I am painting on a Lazy Susan, one of those sorts that you get from somewhere. I believe I bought this in IKEA many years ago. You can see how often it's used. I find it easier if I'm painting on things like the wooden slices rather than an easel. um, it's a lot easier. And I can move it. Don't be afraid to move your piece. I have um, I have a bad neck. I have issues with it, so I move. To save my neck and to save my shoulder, I rather move the piece around. That it's a lot more comfortable. So after I've dried it, and once again, remember if you're going to use a hairdryer, use it on your cooler setting, because if the paint's wet underneath, you're going to cause, colour shift, and it just makes a huge mess. So after I've dried it, I'm going in again, and this time I'm using a mixture of my burnt sienna with some cad red. I don't believe at this point that this isn't a full cad red. I believe it's a hue. I will double check though, and we'll let you know on the screen afterwards. So when I'm painting, working in layers is really important. I think when it comes to acrylic paints. So I'm just bringing. I prefer to work. Obviously, I say obviously. It may not be obvious to some. Some people just paint and that's it. Um, the way I've learned is to start off dark and then you bring forward the colour. And that's what I'm doing. So I put in my base of the shape of my pumpkins, and now I'm building up the colours and bringing them forward. It's almost as well, you can see me there using my kitchen roll to take off parts of paint. My brush is barely wet. It's hardy. This is more a dry brush that I'm doing. Um, I do get my paintbrush wet, but then I wipe it off. I've got a sheet now. I've got an old muslin square um, that I use that used to be, was one of the babies. The baby is nearly 11. But I use that muslin square and I use a kitchen roll and I use it and use it and use it until I basically can't use it anymore because I find the dry paint on there helps when you're doing things like dry brushing. Um, the old paint that's on the kitchen roll helps, remove paint and such. I'm just adding in some darker colours around on the stem of the pumpkin and making sure I got a bit of shadow there as well where the stem meets the pumpkin itself. And just changing up brushes because that brush that I've been using it's become a fuzzy Burt. It was a filbert originally, a small filbert. Um, but it's become, because I do a lot of work on wooden slices, it's become quite frazzled. Um, so it hasn't got a good point anymore, but it's perfect for dry brushing. So what I've done there is I've mixed my phthalo blue with a cad yellow and given it a very dark green on the stem, and that colour will start coming out later on. This part is where I've added my cad red to the cad yellow to give me this lovely orange and a lighter orange. It isn't my final one, it is not the final orange, but it's definitely more of the highlight. And I'm picking where the moonlight would potentially be giving light. You know, and it's a starry night, and you don't know what light is being cast from behind. So for a point of interest, I'm just giving it a slight bit of a lighter glow on these pats, but the main lighting is on the outer side of the pumpkin. And again, I barely put any water onto the brush. It's more of a dry brush. That's the beauty of painting. I think it's what I enjoy so much about painting on the wooden slices is you can do some really lovely dry brushing. See, and I'm moving my painting around rather than stretching and overstretching my neck and such due to prolapse discs in my neck. Um, I let the lazy Susan do the hard work for me. It's really handy, and all I've done is I've put blue tack on the back of the the wooden slice. It works for me. Sometimes I've used tape in the past, but this works absolutely fine. So I'm adding another lighter colour now. I've added more cad yellow to my phthalo blue. Obviously, I'm sorry, I keep saying obviously. Um, phthalo blue and cad yellow are going to make green. So in the first part, I'd added a little bit of the blue to the yellow, and this time I've added more yellow, and so that's to give more of a lighter tone there to being caught in the moonlight. It's a case of stopping and looking at actually looking at it. Sit back a little bit. I was actually standing for this painting as well, so I could stand back and look at it and decide if I wanted more of a highlight here or there, or if it required more of a shadow. At this point, I was kind of considering as well what else was going to come into the piece. For a good couple of minutes, I was considering maybe popping a bumblebee on there, resting on there. Again, just playing with my highlights. Yeah, I do use my fingers a lot. It's probably not the best habit, but I will use my fingers quite a bit. When I'm pausing, I'm just looking. There, I was just putting a little bit of water on my brush, and I was just basically rubbing out the last of the chalk that was used for the pumpkin, just so I could see properly where my highlight was. Now, this point, I decided I was going to paint a dragon. Now, obviously, oh, I hate that word. Obviously, I really must stop saying it. I paint whimsical paintings, and a big part of that is dragons. And in my world, dragons are tiny. They're really no bigger than usually a mushroom. So in this world that I create with my whimsical paintings, which will often include fairies, um, interacting with wildlife. I also, a couple of months ago, started including dragons. I do have a story that I've been working on regarding a tiny dragon meeting a small jumping spider called Matilda. That painting was done a while ago, which encouraged that. I decided to change the side that I was going to put the dragon. I realized that I liked the colouring on the other side where the pumpkin was, so I decided to pop a dragon over. Now, once again, I'm not using a reference picture. This, I'm just sketching. I know not everybody is able to do this, and believe me, it's not been a thing for me. For I've been painting for 4 years now. Where I started taking painting seriously for 4 years and doing it as a full time thing for nearly 2 years. And it's only been in the last year to 18 months where I've really started painting and not using much in the way of references. So this just came, I know in my head what dragons tend to look like, and that's the wonderful thing about this kind of painting is they can look like what you want. It's there's not a rule. So I have an idea in my head of what a dragon could look like, and I can make him look however I like. Isn't that great? That's the fantastic thing about painting and imagination. Same with the colours. There's no rule. You can paint them however you like. There's not, nobody's going to tell you, or maybe somebody might, but it's none of their business. So I'm just, again, like I did with the pumpkins, I'm just getting my lining and just getting my where I want things to be. And I will add a shadow underneath the dragon on that pumpkin later on. So he's got horns, like horns. So I'm just figuring out as I'm doing this part where I want the darker shadows to be. And I want him to be not necessarily looking up to the moon, but looking off into the distance. So with one of his dragging hands up on the stem and the other one just in the background, just reaching over as if he's almost as if he's just landed or maybe about to take off. But I think it's more so that he's just landed, maybe taking a rest, been flying about, been busy, and he's just taken a moment. He's just landed momentarily. He's looking at something and he's going to be shooting back off again in a minute once he's had a breather. I decided to use my Diox Purple um, on the dragon, and obviously it's quite light at this point. Went against my usual rule of starting off dark and working my way to light. Um, I just wanted to make sure that I knew what colours I wanted to do. So I ended up going back darker again quite quickly. Um, didn't even need to act black because dioxine purple is quite dark. It's almost black when you look at it. And then as soon as you add some titanium white, it's like bang, you know, you add a bit of a darker colour and you get this gorgeous mauve. Such a lovely colour to work with. So I add a little bit of black just to get my darker elements in. When I was painting him at this point, if you look at his, like, where his nose would be, I started to think he looked like that, I think it was an anteater in the old Pink Panther cartoons, or from Raccoons. Was it Cyril Sneer? Started entering my mind. I was like, oh, I'm not quite sure about the shape of his face. And the colouring was quite Cyrilly Sneerish as well. But I do, maybe I was tapping into an old memory from watching the Raccoons as a kid. But I do change her up a bit, so it does. He does. This little dragon does start to take a bit more shape. You know, once you've got like the base colours in, you can start playing a little. So there. So giving it a dry, so I can start brightening this dragon and bringing his little character more forward. It does look like I'm drying really close. It is a little bit, a little bit away. And I do have my hair dryer on the coolest setting. I'm just taking off some of the paint from there because again, I'm so happy with dry brushing. It is one of my favourite things to do. So I'm working out where I want my points of colour, points of colour, my more of the light hitting on this dragon. And I want him to have because he's got his wings, but they're not that important at this point. I just want to give the impression that he has the wings. So just bring a little bit of the idea there. It was just a case at that point that I realised I needed a different brush. Now this brush it's tiny. It's not a branded brush at all. It's small and it's battered and it's perfect. um, if do if you paint, you use what is most comfortable. And some of my brushes are branded, some of them aren't, and they just work perfectly for me. So that is his first, basically his paw claw arm. Wanting to give the impression that he's holding on. He's just landed. I'm not worried about going into great detail with scales and such as that because, you know, you're gonna know when you see it that it's a dragon. We know they got scales. I'm not a realist painter by any stretch. It's the idea that's there. I know they tend to have scales, so I don't need to do that part. It's more for me, it's more in like the shading, the colours. And there I'm just giving an impression of like his chest. That maybe the more larger scaling on the chest as dragons to do. I'm giving him a bit of a cheek impression there. And there's this point that's when I'm like, right, I need to change his nose and mouth part a bit more because it's too Cyrilly sneerish for me. It's too derpy, too droopy. So easily sorted. Again, dipped into the Dioxine Purple, and instantly you're able to change the lining. So there's never with acrylic paint. Yeah, it dries fast, but you can change things, and it's great that you could just dry it and start again. Obviously, at this point, I wouldn't want to do that, but you can go over things and adapt and change shades and add something in and stuff. I do make a little mistake in too much white on the eye and a little, and I very quickly adapt. And because if you act quick enough, you can use your brush and a bit of water and take it away. Just not panicking. There, I'm starting to add my lighter highlights now on this dragon where the moon is catching and giving us lighter parts. I'm giving him his nostrils and his eye. This is one of my this brush. It is tiny. It's an army painter one. I if they work, I'll get them from anywhere. I do paint Warhammer 40k, as does my husband. See, I made a mistake there. Too much white off there, so I very quickly got some white on, water on my brush, and wiped it away, and then put the eye back so I could start again. And just while I was giving the eye a rest, I could pop in some claws and holding on, which would be catching in the moonlight. There we go, like that. And then a little bit on the nostrils as well. You'll see it in the more close up that I do. So when I do eyes, I like to give it's the impression that your eyes are wet. So it's very tiny little dots around the eye where it meets and coming around, and obviously a bit of light on them. When I bring it up closer, you'll see that. So these are the much lighter parts. I'm happy with that, so I'm drying again. I was just erasing any chalk marks that I had left from when I sketched the dragon out. And that is my Holbein Luminous Opera Pink and my Luminous Orange from Holbein. They are the best luminous paints out there. I do have Sandier Abstract. I have a few golden are fantastic as well, but the Holbein ones, there really is no other. And this is where I just want to give it that last extra kiss of highlight. I don't go overboard with this stuff, unless you specifically want to have like an in your face, luminous thing. But I think using these particular paints like this really, really helps your paintings pop. I mean, look at that. Very, very cool. Now here I've just gone back into my mix with the Mars Black and Burnt Sienna because I want to give this pumpkin more of a shadow where the dragon's body is has landed. I realised that it needed a bit more shadow there. So my opera pink again even on the dragon. I just want to give some little, tiny little flashes of this bright colour. It it feels more magical. I do these with all the dragons that I paint. They all have some form of one of the luminous colours, but never in a crazy fashion. Just points, just on pads. And I think it really brings them out. Or as I say, you can get the same kind of effect with more of your student grade paints. With like I can't say enough the Sandier abstracts. They're fantastic. Um and you can get that effect with those. You just need to put more layers. I have to do this maybe 2 or 3 times to get the same effect that I can get with Holbein just the once. Um, but if I do more paintings, I am more than happy to use just my Saint Lier's abstract range to show that. So here again, I want to add another lighter highlight onto the stems of the pumpkins, just catching in the light. And I've done this simply by adding more cad yellow to the phthalo blue mix that I created with a green. I do have phthalo green in my drawer, but I couldn't be bothered to bring it out, and it was just that easy to bring that out to make my own basically. So I'm just doing a few more of the highlights, not a massive amount, just here and there. And there you go. I'm just doing my final bit there. I decided that the eye had too much white in it. But when I bring it up to the screen in a moment, you'll see the eye a lot better. And I'm happy. There you go. So my little dragon has I think, just landed on the pumpkin and is about to take off again. Just taking a breather and looking to where the next direction it is he needs to go. Oh, I love making stories. It's part of creating, I think. So there you go, my whimsical dragon and pumpkins. I hope you've enjoyed watching as much as I've enjoyed painting. Hope to catch you again soon. Love you and stay weird.